Now we're moving to our first panel session. So I would like to introduce the chair of the session, Fiona Charnley, who's Professor of Circular Innovation and co-director of the Exeter Centre for Circular Economy within the University of Exeter Business School. Fiona is the co-director of the recently funded UKRI National Interdisciplinary Circular Economy Hub. So with that, Fiona, I'll say over to you. Thank you very much if you would like to introduce the session.
So thank you to all of the researchers that we've heard from this morning for sharing a breadth and depth of insights from your research on the Crestling project. And earlier this morning, we heard from Baroness Bottomley, and she stressed the importance of collaboration and working together between academia, business and government, and also the importance of the physical, social and behavioural scientists. And I think that the Crestling project has successfully integrated all of these factors into the project. So that's been fascinating to hear about those insights. We've got a fantastic lineup of panellists for this session. And before I introduce the panellists, just wanted to say that during the session, I'm going to ask each of the panellists to introduce themselves and give us a few insights into their own work, and also to give us some initial thoughts in response to the presentations that we've heard this morning. I'm also going to ask the panellists if they have any questions for the Crestling team, and then we'll have time for a more general Q&A. So if you do have any questions for either the panellists throughout the session or indeed for the wider Crestling team, then please do add them to the chat. So I believe we are still waiting for one panellist, Walter Stahel, who will hopefully join us. But for now, I want to hand to the panellists to introduce themselves. So I'm first of all going to hand over to Nancy, and then to Hans, and then to Zengwei. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Nancy. So Nancy Bocken is a professor in sustainable business at Maastricht University in the Netherlands, and her research topics include sustainable business models, business experiments for sustainability, circular economy, sufficiency, and closing the idea-action gap. So over to you, Nancy.
Thank you, Fiona, and I think you already helped me a little bit with the introduction, so I don't need to introduce a lot more, I guess. But probably, yeah, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to the panel, and it was very exciting to see all the Crestling presentations this morning. I think it covered a lot of ground, and also, yeah, a lot linked to my personal research interests as well, so I'll try to link it a little bit to that. So what I saw is a lot of developments on understanding business practice and where businesses are now in terms of circular economy. Also assessment and indicators. So basically what is being assessed and what indicators are being used, and the link to the SDGs. And also I see still quite a few gaps in the research and in the practice basically that could be covered. So I'm saying hello to Walter as well, who's coming into the room. But basically I see a lot of links also to my own research agenda. So I'm currently leading a project called Circular X, which is about experimentation with circular service business models. So I saw that a lot of the methods that are being applied, like also like design-led methods, are being taken up by the team. So that's very encouraging to see, because we need to make a change in practice, and doing more practical research together with companies and engaging companies can be very helpful for that. So my congratulations to the team for picking up on those types of methods. Maybe an open question for later on is that I would like to understand a little bit more about the types of resource strategies that are being investigated in the cases. So it wasn't always clear whether you're looking into recycling or more into slowing the loop or even regeneration. So I think, as a community, as a research and also practice community, we need to do more to sort of elevate the practice to the higher levels in the waste hierarchy. So I was wondering how the project is addressing that. So maybe that's a question for later. But I think Walter should have been the first one before me. So I'll stop now, and I will leave it at this for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I didn't realize I had to get out and come in again through a different link, but we are all learning. Okay, I'm Walter Stahel. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
I'm on Wikipedia, so I'm not going to present myself, and I'm not going to comment on this morning's session, but I will give you my vision in less than 10 minutes of building a low waste, low carbon, low mass circular industrial economy. Because this is one way to achieve key objectives of a sustainable development. Low waste society can be achieved by a transfer to a circular industrial economy, including cultural changes in individual behavior. Low carbon society can be achieved by a transfer to a circular industrial economy, preserving the embodied water, electricity, and CO2, and innovation into circular sciences, such as green electricity. And a low anthropogenic mass society can be achieved by a transfer to a circular industrial economy, preserving the existing stocks of infrastructure, buildings, equipment, vehicles. So if circular economy is the only strategy to achieve these three aims, objectives, let's look at a low waste circular industrial economy. The area of R, refuse, reduce, reuse, is open to all. It's open instantly, but we have to do it. Nobody else is going to do it. We, as owners of our belongings, have to do it. And don't say you can't do it. Remember Charlie Brown. His motto was, "You can do it, Charlie Brown." Yes, we can do it too. Now the area of D, delinking materials to recover pure atoms, molecules, is a global and a science and money issue. We need innovation into circular sciences, in circular chemistry, metallurgy, energy, and we need it urgently. Performance economy, selling objects as a service, is only efficient if it is complemented by a public procurement buying objects as a service. Public procurement impacts 33% of GDP. So public procurement is a key player in a move to a performance economy. Now, what is the problem with the economy? Quoting Charlie Chaplin in The Great Dictator, machines that have given us abundance have left us in want. That means that we, the people in industrialized regions with a society for abundance, are the key responsible actors in the area of R. And that means, how can we better motivate people? Educate, motivate in order to shift people's wants from consumption to use. If we don't solve that problem, we are going to sink. It's a different case for less developed countries where people don't live in abundance, where they lack food and shelter and transport. And now, how can politicians or everybody motivate people? Because that is a big problem. Now I'm quoting Saint-Exupéry in Citadel. When you want to build a ship, do not begin by gathering wood, cutting boards, organizing work gangs, but rather create the longing for the sea, awaken within men the desire for the vast and endless sea. And everything we have heard this morning is about building ships by gathering wood, cutting boards, organizing work gangs. No, we will never get there in useful time, but who is capable of creating this longing for a circular economy? Now let's move to a low carbon circular industrial economy. Studies by Anders Wickman and Christian Sandberg have for 6 countries have shown that the circular economy can reduce CO2 emissions nationwide by 66%, create 4% additional jobs, improve the trade balance, but it will not reduce carbon emissions by 100%. So therefore we need a radical different innovation into circular sciences to overachieve the 100% in industrialized countries. Third point, a low mass economy. I think most politicians haven't noticed that the anthropogenic mass has now become the dominant force in shaping the face of Earth. Earth is at the crossover point where anthropogenic mass will surpass all global living biomass, because anthropogenic mass doubles roughly every 20 years. So if we continue this at this pace, we will simply push biomass, push nature into an abyss and destroy nature and destroy ourselves. So a low mass circular industrial economy we can create by maintaining existing stocks of anthropogenic mass in the circular industrial economy, but that needs a radical new industrial and political vision and economic policy. And economic policy, we are faced with a tale of 2 economies. We are still in a linear economy based on productive labor, value added, economy of scale, subsidized fossil fuels, global supply chains. And we want to be in a circular economy based on essential labor, value of stocks maintained, local regional services, intelligent decentralized industries. Now, this means we have 2 tails, but all the 3 objectives I mentioned, low carbon, low mass, low, we can not solve by present economic theory. And I give you another quote from Albert Einstein, 1915. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So the present economic theory cannot solve the problem of how to create and support a circular industrial economy. So to summarize, motivation for change, creativity for longing for the sea, low carbon and low mass will be the result of a circular industrial economy, not the drivers. If we change the economic thinking and political framework conditions, we can get there in a relatively short time in the industrial countries into a low waste, low carbon, low mass circular industrial economy. And we need to do this to give the less developed countries space to develop themselves. So we have a moral obligation. And may I remind you of what Her Royal Majesty the Queen of England said with regard to COP26, act now. Stop talking. Act now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Walter, for sharing that inspirational vision with us. I think that was very what we need to do. And so I'd like to hand over to our next panelist, Hans Christian Eberl. So Hans is a policy officer at the European Commission and deals with Horizon Europe programming as a policy officer. And he's an expert in circular economy, chemicals and product policy. So I'll hand over to you, Hans, to introduce yourself further. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Fiona. I don't know whether I feel desperate now or enthusiastic after Walter's speech, because there's so much to do, and not everything that he said was really optimistic. But I think I listened to what you presented this morning, and I think we are going in the right direction. I also learned a new word, and I would like to see myself as a policy entrepreneur. I don't know whether I understood this correctly this morning, but I think that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to bring these things together and push for this transition. And right now we are indeed working on the second programming cycle under Horizon Europe. I was involved in the drafting of the program itself, and now I'm preparing the calls for the 23-24 work program, as I did for 21-22. And I also see from the applications that came in for 21 that there is quite some room for improvement, things that we can do better in the second work program. And that's why events like this one are extremely welcome, because I think we get some feedback that we can take up in our programming. So what I'm doing is at the interface between traditional regulative, sectoral policies, say on plastics or textiles or whatever is a key area under the Circular Economy Action Plan, and other means of steering behavior, financing, funding, taxonomy, etc. And there are so many things that I would like to talk about that you addressed in the presentations this morning. I mean I totally agree, and I would want to support you that the assessment, the highly theoretical thing is not so theoretical, that this is actually key to what we are doing for the circular economy transition and in this transition. Because Walter Stahel said it's about impacts, it's about CO2 savings, it's about climate neutrality, but we only started measuring the CO2 impact of circularity measures like 5 years ago. I don't see any articles that are from before that, from before say 2005. And then we have this massive problem: how do we assess the CO2 impact of business service models? That would be something completely new. We also need to develop and fine-tune our tools that we have for this assessment. Then life cycle assessment, already an established instrument based on product environmental footprint. Yes, but it doesn't address the social dimension, and companies are not really yet acquainted yet with the social LCA instrument. So it's true that I don't see a need for new technologies. I don't see a need for big research in the circular economy sector. I see a need for integrated approaches that have a broader understanding of value chains, that are more inter than intra, I must say I'm less and less interested in industrial circular economy, but the way you understand it and you presented in this workshop is already much broader. So you're moving away from traditional industrial circular economy. When I started working on circular economy back in Austria at the Ministry of Environment, early 90s, it was only industrial, and it was basically starting with the sorting of household waste. It was waste management, and when you start with the sorting, it's already a lost cause. It's a completely wrong approach, and it took us like 25 years or 30 years almost that we are now talking about value chains that incorporate consumers, that talk about the role of retailers, that talk about business models, that talk about refurbishment and reuse, lifetime of products, etc. So I see that we are going in the right direction, and all of this we are willing to take up in the work program for Horizon Europe. But there's still a long way that we have ahead of us. But I'm willing to go that way with you, and that's why I'm here. And but my question to the presenters, to the researchers, would be why should companies want to report? I agree that the assessment is the key part, but how can we motivate them to do this extra work, because it is extra work, maybe one reason would be that they will have to verify green claims in the future. There are initiatives under the Circular Economy Action Plan mandate. There's a legal package coming up early next year, hopefully. And one reason for reporting would be indeed satisfy the needs of consumers, of the civil society. But I mean, how do we get consumers to engage in the circularity transition? Lots of our future projects will be about the just transition and about making circularity also available at a lower cost point, making it socially inclusive and just. So we have projects with households, with territory. We'll go for new approaches in Horizon Europe, because I think that the merely industry-focused approach does not work or is not efficient enough. Let's put it like this. But that's a few words as a starting point.
Thank you very much, Hans, and thank you for picking up on some of the key themes that came out of the presentations this morning, and I look forward to that with the Cressling team afterwards. So I'd now like to introduce our final panelist. Zengwei Yuan is a professor at the School of the Environment in Nanjing University, and his interest is from the circular economy, and particularly exploring ways to close phosphorus cycling loops by biotransforming and biodegrading organic waste like food and animal manure. So very interested to hear about your research. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you, Fiona, for your introduction, and thank you, Pauline, for your invitation to join this project, Cressling, and for this meeting. Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you again. I'm Dr. Yuan, as you, Fiona, introduced. My research is focused on new methods of closing material loops, especially phosphorus cycles. So in the past 2 decades, I have been completing 2 research. The first one is to quantify the phosphorus cycles at a global, country and city level to identify the hotspots of closing phosphorus cycles. Based on the results of this research, I found that the global phosphorus element flows from terrestrial phosphate rock to the ocean sediment. And at the same time, much phosphorus was contained or accumulated in organic wastes, like food wastes, agricultural wastes, and the sludge of wastewater treatment plants. So if we want to close the phosphorus loop and reduce the losses into environment, we need to recycle this organic waste. That's why I began my second research. In the past 2 decades, my research is focused on the new technology development, especially biotechnology, to recycle the phosphorus containing wastes and biotransform these wastes into protein and organic fertilizer. That's my background. With regard to the project question, especially the presentation in the morning, I found it's really interesting because it investigates the current situation of circular economy practice, identified the barriers of and provided a strategy to promote private sector and organizational engagement with circular economy, as well as the method to assess the performance of circular economy practice. I remember I published the first article about circular economy in China in 2006. In that paper, I talk about the strategy, the concept, strategy, and practice of circular economy in China. Based on this presentation, I found the findings will help us to understand the circular economy in a new viewpoint. To me, as a technician, I think it's very, very important to promote the engagement of private and organizations engagement in circular economy. So it's really interesting, and I hope I can get more information about this project. My question is, as we all know that in most cases, circular economy means new technologies, new products, and high prices compared to raw material-based products technology. So this may be a constraint to implementing the circular economy. What do you think? Based on my experience, it's really difficult to develop the circular economy technology or new products in practice. I don't know if it's true in European countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zen and Evan. So you've got your hand up. Is that in response to Zengwei's question?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's helpful to provide a response here, but I think the work by Arnold Tucker is about product service systems. Also, Walter Stahel has written on the service economy, and I think a lot of those service models can provide affordability if they're designed in the right way. So I'm also a co-founder of an organization called HOMI, but I'm not in the day-to-day business of it. But basically in HOMI, we have this pay-per-use business model as well. So we basically implemented it because we thought it would be good for the environment. So people pay per use, and they pay less for a low temperature wash, for instance, than for a high temperature wash. So it's based around white goods. But we thought it would be mainly an environmental proposition, but what we basically saw is that people signed up because it was a more affordable option, because they wouldn't have an upfront cost of a highly expensive device. So basically, it also became more of a social and socio-economic proposition in addition to an environmental proposition. And I think, yeah, we need more of these types of business models in practice. And you see that slowly large companies are sort of catching up, but it's a very small percentage still of their mostly linear business model. But in the Circular X project that I'm leading at the moment, we look into different sectors and to what extent they're experimenting with these models and how they basically scale up. So more will come on that topic as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Nancy. Some really great examples there. And Walter, do you want to come in?
Yes, just about project service systems, or what I call the objects as a service. Simply think of hotels, public transport, airlines, taxi. The product service systems are all around us. You don't have to invite new ones. Laundromats, schools. We just don't realize that every time we take a train, we don't actually buy the train and sell it again at the other end, but we buy a transport ticket with a guarantee to get us there safely. And it's the sharing economy that if you want to study the impacts, I would study first all the existing systems, Xerox, photocopiers, if you want to be in the business area. But public transport, any kind of public transport, is a project service system, or is trains as a service.
If I may quickly respond, I think this is a very good remark, and it was also a very nice report from the Netherlands, basically, that said that as a country we already adopted a lot of circular practices, like second-hand markets, like shoe repair, car repair. It was a very nice report. But what I also see is that this world is different than 10 or 15 years ago. So I think digital technology, which was mentioned, I guess, by one of the earlier speakers in the program, is changing the way that we operate some of those services. Even public transport, you can sort of navigate it much more easily and make connections. But the same with Internet of Things that can allow a company to track what is actually going on with the equipment that users use. So it's not only a business to business, but also business to consumer and consumer to consumer transition that is happening and being enabled by Internet of Things and other digital technologies. So I think a lot will happen. And I think we also as academics, also as industry, need to remain aware that the developments go in the right direction. Because you can also think about platforms that encourage people to buy more, even if it's secondhand, and adding up to all the logistics. Like there's examples of people that buy new clothes every week because they think, oh, let's send it to Vinted because it will be sustainable anyways, because someone else will use it. And of course, that's not the idea behind it. So I think we as a community need to remain critical and help design the best systems from the start. Yeah, we're also involved in developing tools that enable that, for at least for the companies that are willing to take those up.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Nancy and Walter. I think some excellent points and really demonstrate the importance of the role of the consumer within these circular business models. And I think this responds to kind of a question, Hans, that you posed. And I know you've got your hand, so you perhaps want to come in on the back of this, but perhaps we could pick up on to the question about how we get consumers to engage in the transition towards a circular economy and how businesses are starting to do that effectively. And I think some of the examples, Nancy, that you shared demonstrate that, but I think there's still a long way to go. But Hans, did you want to come in now?
Yes, it was exactly on this point. I see it also as an answer to my question. I mean, however, I'm cautious. I'm worried when I see in a recent 3 years ago OECD report as an example for dematerialization, Uber and Airbnb. I mean, business models, dematerialization, that's wonderful, but I mean, prove to me that this is sustainable. This comes, that's a pitfall. This comes with a huge rebound effect. And talking about rebound effects, also mentioned this morning, green energy, mobility. I mean, if we just believe that some technical fix is possible, and that by changing the source of energy and mobility, we resolve our problems. No, that's completely wrong. That will have disastrous consequences. So yes, business models are key, but prove that they are circular. If they are circular, prove that they are sustainable. I think that was a key point this morning, because circular does not equal sustainable, and sustainable also include the social dimension. And yeah, and another thing that was said this morning, bio-based products. I mean, again. They are not by definition circular. They are not by definition sustainable. I mean, prove it. Yeah. I don't want to be the spoil sport. I don't want to ruin the fun, but I mean, these are things that worry me.
Yeah, thanks, Hans. And I thought Walter would probably want to come in response to that challenge. Walter.
Yes, the problem without green energy, we will never have green steel, and we will never have green cement, which means we will never have green products. So that the whole thing of the circular economy is great for the existing stock, but especially steel is there is a way to produce zero carbon steel using hydrogen and scrap, but we don't have the technologies yet. That's why I say we need innovation to, first of all, to produce zero carbon energy and mass produce for industry, and then produce zero carbon materials and products. Sorry.
Great points. Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, so coincidentally, I was actually in the Circular Metals Hub stakeholder meeting yesterday. So Fiona is very well aware of these hubs, being the lead of those. But yesterday, actually in this, I was quite surprised that in this industry, which for me is quite upstream, there was a lot of discussion on these new business models that actually ask something quite different from the consumer, whether it's car sharing, like Volvo is one of those examples that by 2030 apparently doesn't want to sell any car anymore. So it means it will go 100% to sharing, leasing, etc. And of course, there's reusable packaging examples like Loop, which was also mentioned in the context of metal and steel, like aluminum cans. So for me, it was very encouraging to see that upstream is connecting with downstream, and those new business models can break through a couple of things like new technologies, but also changing customer behavior. But this morning, the presentation by the Baroness was also quite clear, and that was also referring to the work by David Attenborough. Please think about what you can do yourself as well, like buy less. We're actually investigating this in the research agenda on business force efficiency and consumer behavior related to that. So that's the work by Laura Niesen. And she's actually creating a database on business force efficiency. So anti-consumerist ways of selling, but also less radical ways. And I think business can support consumers in better behavior, but it also needs to come from ourselves and how we change our own behaviors. So that was yeah, not only upstream, but also downstream, how we behave basically.
Great, thank you. And I think we've got a few questions from the audience. So I'm going to invite, I think, Heather to come and ask those. And then also, I think that we have the Crestling team who are able to come back and join us and respond to the questions from the panel. So I think first of all, we'll go over to the questions for the panel from the audience.
Hi, I think I'm on. So we have a few questions from Santi. I'll choose one. This is for Thomas and Anna, I believe Anna Diaz, possibly. Do you think that Anna's model can respond to the barriers identified in Thomas's research?
So I think, Heather, this is a question for the Crestling team, is it?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question? So
Okay.
Can you repeat?
I will reply. Yeah, I will reply to it. One of the aspects that my model addresses is the design of new business models. And here is where I think the work of Thomas can be very useful. In any case, design, product design and business model design are closely interlinked. And yeah, I think there's potential for synergy.
Do you have anything to add to that, Thomas, from your perspective on your research?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what Anna really looked at is about the development process, and I think some key points that she highlights are the relevance of this collaboration. I mean, it's been said before, but this collaboration through the value chain and also within the organization to produce these circular products that are needed. Also, this value change perspective that she addresses is also a key aspect to deal with some of the barriers that we identified in our research. And yeah, that basically, I think that really links the two researches.
Thank you. Fiona, would you like me to read some questions for the panel as well?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so this one's from Simone Fant. This is for Walter Stahel. Circularity means more than just technological innovations for material and industrial efficiency. It's also about consumption reduction. Do you think that the mainstream vision of circular economy is going in the right direction, or are we delivering an incomplete message? I think this has been addressed a little bit already, but do you have anything specific to say to that?
Well, the big problem is the motivation. Creating this shift to a circular economy is, of course, very silent compared to the very noisy publicity from the manufacturing industry for cigarettes, for alcohol, for new cars, we get inundated by publicity. And it somehow needs a big personal conviction simply to ignore. I ignore shops and I ignore publicity. But that means you have to be very egocentric. You have to know what you want and resist all these temptations. And that, especially for young people, is very difficult. Peer pressure. Nancy, do you want to add something?
Yes, definitely. I was reflecting on this morning, actually, when I was thinking about consumption and what it means to people. And there's a lot written about our lizard brain and evolution that we just want to consume more. But somehow we also managed to not eat everything that we find in the supermarkets, and most of us still stay quite normal in that sense. So I think we also need to adopt different behaviors in the way that we consume other products as well, and have a more deliberate mindset, and basically take into account the waste hierarchy when we buy and actually decide not to buy. So I think that is also something that we need to take into account in other parts of our lives. Having said that, a lot of the environmental studies have shown that environmental impact is directly related to income, and in the West, we're basically among the highest incomes in the world. So either we need to look into a whole different economy, looking at donut economics and maybe work less. I saw some colleagues on LinkedIn going towards a four-day work week, for instance. So maybe reducing our income and spending less, more time on free time. So I think we need to radically rethink, because otherwise what would we do with the income we don't spend? Do we put it in a sustainable investment? And what is a sustainable investment? So it's a bigger economic picture that we need to look at if we save money by not consuming. But yeah, it's there are choices that you as an individual can make, and also sustainable investing with the money that you save, for instance. So that's an idea.
Yeah, thank you, Walter and Nancy. And I think the pandemic has really forced us to do some of that rethinking, particularly around kind of work balance and also finances. Hans, do you want to come in response to that question as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, like 5 years ago, I would have answered to the question. There are three big issues. One is that the topic is not central. The people are not aware of the massive problems that we have. The other one is that sustainable products are totally uncool, and the cool kids won't buy them, because they are ugly. They all have these horrible colors, and they just feel wrong. And the third thing would be, yes, a sustainable lifestyle would be a privilege of the rich, or at least of the wealthy. And related to this is that we didn't address consumers properly. We didn't break it down into target groups. We didn't offer anything specifically, and policy, traditional regulatory policy doesn't do that at all. So there's one broad mass of consumers, but that is completely wrong. There is completely different target groups. So the problem awareness has changed completely. Young people, who are the future market, I suppose, are completely aware of the problem with our style of consumption. That a sustainable lifestyle would be available also to not so wealthy people. I think this is something that we have to prove, but our future project should aim at this, because I think this is a key aspect. And in the days of COVID recovery, this becomes even more important. And that is clearly something that we will aim for on the Horizon Europe. And the third thing, with the uncool products like sustainable fashion, that this was really horrible like 5 years ago. This has changed already, and the big brands are taking this up, and their jeans and sneakers, they're startups, they're companies that have that are the new in brands, and the big brands are desperately trying to get into that market, and now Nike and Adidas are copying some small independent niche brands. So this is already happening. So we just have to bring these three things together. Yeah.
You're right, Hans. There's perceptions are definitely shifting, and I think we're all familiar with example companies really pushing the boundaries for innovation, and also from a design perspective, really bringing forward that user-centered design thinking to push the boundaries of sustainable products and to try and move that perception. Heather, do we have any other questions for the panel?
Yep, we can have one more that could be directed at the panel. This is from Tatiana. She says, the proposed approaches are very interesting. However, in an increasingly constrained context with regard to planetary limits, Will these sustainable business models be sufficient in a relatively short time frame and with systemic impacts? To what extent will the solutions be able to meet the social challenges while radically reducing environmental impacts and promoting social justice? I think this was also maybe touched on by Hans Christian already, but perhaps the social justice issue might be one to focus on.
Great, thank you, Heather. Which of our panelists wants to take that question first?
Well, one area where I think people can immediately change their buyer behavior is in where you have Hofläden, where you have farms that are directly selling food, homegrown food on the farm. And that is increasingly getting popular in many areas of Switzerland, but of course, and Europe in general, I think, to buy regional and seasonal. But again, it means giving up some habits, or like strawberries at Christmas and things like. But food is definitely something. Not buy mineral water, but drink tap water. Food and drink is microbreweries, microbakeries. There certainly, each individual can have a big impact on the supply structure.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Like, where can you start individually? So again, earlier work on environmental assessment has shown that it's food, mobility, energy using appliances in the home, and the construction and the way we live in homes that dominate our footprints. More than 70% of the footprint comes from that. So shifting to eating more local, but also less meat and dairy. Shifting to doing more on foot or by bicycle rather than taking the car, and certain other behaviors as well, like in the winter, put on an extra layer rather than switching on the heating more, etc. So there's many common sense things that we can do. But from a policy perspective, what I find encouraging, and that's a trend that I am following, is a circular economy package, but specifically all the strategies that are focused on slowing the loop or sufficiency, what I call it. So for instance, access to spare parts, right to repair, going against planned obsolescence. So for me, those are the policy trends that need to be accelerated even in the circular economy package. You see that companies like IKEA and H&M are already looking into that and trying to be ahead of some of those policies. But I think if policy were to push us and push industry even in a better direction, I think I would focus more on those slowing the loop strategies and how policy can accelerate that more in business and individual practice.
Repair cafes are a huge success in the UK and other European countries. Apple, for example, is now even giving up its old policy, and they are supplying now tools and spare parts so for people to repair themselves their iPhone. So things are changing, but the right to repair and the help to repair, like repair cafes, is certainly, especially for elderly or people without manual skills, very helpful.
Yeah, thank you both. And Hans, did you want to come in to comment on policy, and also maybe your thoughts on kind of how we can ensure that transition towards circularity is socially just as well?
Yes, please. But first on repair cafes, I had a talk with Mr. Repair Cafe, Professor Martin Charter, I think 2 weeks ago. The guy from Farnham, and it has an interesting social dimension, because if you think that only poor people go there and have their things repaired, you are completely wrong, and that again is an awareness and a
Oh, I think we've lost Hans for the time being. Yeah, it seems like we have. So I think it would be really useful to revisit some of the questions from the panel, because we do have the Crestling team able to join us by amazing virtual technology. So I wondered, I mean, Walter, you have your hand up. I don't know whether that's in response to something that Hans was just saying, so I'll let you come in first.
Yeah, in Zurich, we now have MD cafes, the same thing as repair cafes, but it's doctors or retired doctors that come into a cafe, and then people that have a medical discussion, medical problem, they can discuss anonymously with experts to have a second opinion or have an opinion on medical issues. And I think especially now also with Corona, that is a big success, but I'm not aware if it has been copied elsewhere.
That's really interesting, Walter. And I think actually you could start, letting your imagination go wild, thinking about kind of how you could apply the repair cafe model to other applications. I think Hans might be back with us now. The joys of online conferencing. But I'd really want to make sure we've got 15 minutes left of the session. I want to make sure that the Crestling team get a chance to respond to some of the panel's earlier comments. And so, Nancy, I wondered if we could start with you. You had a question around the types of resource strategies that the team were investigating.
Yeah, my question was around, I think we know a lot about recycling. It was also a comment made in the panel earlier that we spend a lot of good time focusing on how we can improve recycling. But of course, first and foremost, we need to avoid and consume less and reuse. So the higher strategies in the waste hierarchy. So my question would be, to what extent has this been investigated in the Crestling team, and also is it becoming more commonplace in the industry examples that they're studying?
Should I answer, or could I answer that, maybe, if possible?
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, I could answer your question, Nancy, if no one else.
Perfect.
And I also take the opportunity to answer to one of Walter Stahel's comments in the beginning about we were showing how to build a ship, but not the vision. And I think I tried to make it clear in the introduction from my part that the starting point for the corporate engagement is really a strong circularity and sustainability vision. And when we come now to your question, Nancy, about which strategies do we see? So especially in the work of Anna Diaz on product development, and the work of Estefania and Thomas on business models on the regional level of incumbent firms, it's always a strong sustainability and circularity vision. And this is the basis to work on these more advanced and radical strategies. Yeah. So I think we have an agreement all here that circularity is not about a better waste management, a little bit more of recycling. We really need to radical innovate for a circular economy. Yeah. So this means really to radical innovate business models. When we talk about private organizations, we really need to innovate on a radical level products and product service offerings and models and systems. And also, as Enrique showed, within public sector organizations. So yes, on the one hand, as you were saying before, we are providing tools for those who are willing to engage, yeah, and then really to find ways to enable radical circular strategies. And on the other hand, what we see is also in our research and in general in our projects is much more interest also from private sector organizations, companies. Yeah, so this really increased sharply over the last 2 years. Many more companies are now really interested in how to find new ways to be more sustainable, circular, also on a radical level. We know from studies and surveys, the the starting point is a low one, so to say. Yeah, so many companies haven't done much on the advanced level, but I think it's really increasingly now at the moment. This was my understanding and answer.
Great, thank you. And I think there's another member of the team that wants to come in as well.
Yes, thank you. From my side, I wanted to add a couple of examples of short loop circular economy strategies. For instance, we've been able to investigate refurbishing of aircrafts in the so-called retrofit market. And this consists in preserving the internal structure of the aircraft and goes beyond recycling or energy recovery. So that was quite interesting. And also we found, for instance, product-oriented strategies in the case of high precision lab measurement system, in which the original equipment manufacturer was offering a service layer onto the product next to the product itself. And thirdly, we've also found result-oriented product service systems in the case of consumer electronics and telecommunications, more specifically with the internet boxes. So yes, recycling and energy recovery is quite prevalent, but also we see the signs of more transformative approaches.
Fantastic, thank you for those responses. Nancy, did you want to respond to that?
No, I think it's very clear what was said, so nothing more to add here.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. So just moving on to Walter, you didn't have so much as a question, but something that you mentioned in your introduction that interested me, and I wondered what the Crestling team thought, was you highlighted that public procurement is a key player in the move towards a circular economy. And I just wondered, as part of the team, kind of what the role of procurement in the organisations that they studied. Walter, feel free to jump in if you have another question as well.
Well, one of the lighthouse examples of public procurement, or rather public performance procurement, is 10 or 20 years ago when NASA decided no longer to buy rockets, but only to buy space transport. And that led to a bunch of innovative startups, including Blue Horizon, SpaceX, there's several others. And actually today, reusable rockets have become standard, whereas they didn't exist when NASA was buying rockets for space transport. So by shifting the procurement to performance, you really push innovation into new, cheap, reusable circular models. And before somebody mentioned remanufacturing an aircraft is actually also 80% cheaper than buying a new aircraft for the same performance. So it's not only the economic, not only the ecologic aspect, it's also the economic aspect and the local labor. Sorry.
Certainly, thank you for that. And the Crestling team, was there anything that you wanted to come back on regarding procurement or any insights that you gained?
Maybe
Yes.
Natasha, sorry, go ahead, Natasha.
Yeah. No, I can only stress the importance, yes, of the public procurement, or the power of the public sector in using procurement to, as Walter just said, to create the demand for innovation and set specific criteria in what they want, because it amounts to such to a large resources in certain cases, large demand, that's definitely one of the tools that the public sector has to really drive market innovation in the private sector. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Henrika.
Yeah, maybe one more topic besides the procurement part. I think it's also funding calls. I mean, our research project was funded by a Horizon 2020 project. And I think that funding can really also shape where innovation is going. In the energy sector, in the cement sector, all these industries are heavily reliant on public funding as well. So besides this procurement aspect, this is also a very, very important aspect I just wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And it's a really important point. And Hans, actually, that was something I was going to come back to you on, because in your opening address, you said that you don't see a need for necessarily new technologies or CE specific research, but you do see a need for a more integration across value chains. And I just wondered, from your perspective, kind of how funding programs can support that cross value chain collaboration, and what would you like to see from those types of proposals?
We can support anything and everything. We just need to write it in the codes. And that brings me back to the question on social justice that I couldn't answer because my connection stopped. We need to write it in the codes, and I would then need to know what we really want to achieve when we say the circular economy transition needs to be just. Very often when we talk about just, we mean inclusive. Which is not the same. We mean that everyone should have access to these services, but I mean, should everyone pay the same price for the same things? Would that be just? I'm not so sure even. But to avoid this philosophical political discussion, I would suggest we should be even more ambitious. We should demonstrate in our projects that, and we should ask for that in our calls. So that the projects will deliver on these points, that they demonstrate that sustainable living, including circular living, is in fact cheaper for consumers, for the civil society, that it makes life easier also from an economic perspective. That would be just, in my opinion. So because then we simply put our standards higher, so we don't have this discussion what justice, social justice really means, and inclusiveness, because that would in any case be inclusive and just. And I think that's what we want to do with, for example, the CCRI initiative, Circular Cities and Regions, and also with a call that I wanted to have 2 years ago already, and that will now materialize in 2023, I hope, on 100 model households, sustainable households or circular households, where we really want to do something like a circularity consultancy, circularity advice, and really want to play this with model households, with volunteers, and demonstrate that this is also economically beneficial. So we just need to do it. I think we have to reconsider our instruments, and they are broad enough, and they are fit for purpose. We have all sorts of instruments for funding, from coordination and support actions to the traditional research and innovation actions, and more innovation actions. We just need to define the scale. What's traditionally called the technology readiness level, how far we want to go. We need to define the focus. We need to say it when we want to include retailers in value chains. We need to say it when we want to make living easier for consumers, and we need to write it in our calls. And if it's not realistic enough for some, we will do it nonetheless, and we will try. And in the history of research and innovation framework programs, there's always been lots of calls that weren't that successful, but that is pretty normal. I mean, this is science. This is research on the ground, and if 90% doesn't work and like 10% has brilliant results, I mean, that's perfect. I'm happy with that. That's not a waste of money. On the contrary, also we need to change our understanding of our instruments, and the same for sustainable financing. We were talking about funding now, but we should also talk about financing. We should talk about investments, public-private investments, and taxonomy was mentioned as an important point, and I find it great I mean, you brought up all these points in the morning. So thanks to the panelists, to the presenters in the morning. Yes, we need a different understanding of efficiency of our financial instruments, and we need to be precise. We need just to articulate what we want, and then I think we can do it. But I can reassure you that we will address exactly these points in the upcoming framework program, which we're drafting right now.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Hans. I think there's a lot of agreements with your points, and also I think there's probably plenty of people on this call who would be more than happy to input into that future call, and it's very exciting, you know, to have this opportunity and to be able to see what comes out, particularly in this area across value chain collaboration and innovation. One of the things that you mentioned, I know we're coming to the end of the session, but was around kind of to make a kind of just we need to make the products and the services that we're creating accessible and available and at the right price point for all. And actually, this brings us full circle back to a question, Zengwei, that you had initially to the panel and to the Crest team around, you know, does circular economy mean new technologies, products that are ultimately going to cost more than the existing models? I just wondered if there was anything that you wanted to come in on around that point, or any other points. Zengwei.
Yeah, okay. In China, public sectors and private companies are both interested in implementing the concept of the circular economy. For example, the central government issued circular economy promotion law in China, and set up a series of policies to promote the implementation of circular economy. And the researchers developed so many technologies to recycle the waste. You know, in China, there are so many populations. The waste is a big problem. In practice, the many companies show that they are interested to apply this technology in practice to solve the problem. But compared to the traditional products, the recycling materials usually has a higher production costs. The problem is who should pay for the new technology, especially the higher parts of the price. They need a payment from government, or the market should be paid for it. That's a bigger problem. Maybe we need a new business model. I'm not sure. We are exploring the way to balance the benefits among private companies, researchers, the technology developers, and the government. We want to find a new way. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your points. And I think we've seen today a lot of examples of new types of collaborations, new business models, new ways of working, and particularly at the nexus of that kind of academic, industry and policy interface. So I've found the presentations this morning very inspirational, and the panel session has been fantastic. A lot of really important points raised, and a fantastic discussion. So unfortunately, that brings us to the session, but I just want to again thank all of the Crestling team for your inputs this morning, and thank you very much to all of our panelists who've provided some fantastic insight and discussion points. And I look forward to hearing this afternoon's sessions.
Thank you very much, Fiona, the panel, and the Crestling team for your fascinating discussion over the last hour or so. We are closing now for lunch. Look forward to seeing you back in about 40 minutes. I think the discussion this afternoon, getting into policies and places for circular economy, will follow on very nicely from what we've just heard in the last few minutes. So see you all in 40 minutes. Thank you.